Charlotte May Bennett sat near the aisle of that old wooden church, head bowed like she was praying, but her lips never moved. Her fingers, cracked and raw from too many long days scrubbing, gently rested on her daughter's head. Gracie, only 9, pressed tight against her mother's side, looking up with wide, cautious eyes. No husband, no pew marked by a family name, just the two of them, sitting close to the edge like even the benches had backed away from the rumors. Reverend Cook was preaching, or trying to. His sermon dragged on about divine justice, but the fire had long gone out of his voice. His hands fidgeted against the pulpit. People weren't listening anyway. They kept glancing at the church doors. Something was coming. You could feel it in the air. Charlotte felt it most of all. And then, creak. The church doors opened. Bootsteps echoed down the aisle. Sheriff Lyle Rusk stepped in first, 2 deputies flanking him in soaked dusters. Their faces were blank with duty, not doubt. He didn't speak to the reverend, didn't ask permission, just walked straight toward Charlotte, who sat still as stone. Gracie whimpered. The sheriff stopped, voice cold and low. "Charlotte May Bennett, you're under arrest for theft of public funds from the school." In that moment, everything felt wrong, like sin had slipped into the chapel dressed as justice. Murmurs rippled through the pews, quiet but cutting. Charlotte looked up slowly, her face calm, the kind of calm that comes after everything's already been burned down. "You know that's not true," she said. "I know what I was told," the sheriff replied, then flicked 2 fingers. The deputies moved as one. Gracie cried out, a small, sharp sound. One man yanked Charlotte to her feet. The other clamped cuffs around her wrists, cold metal on bone. Charlotte didn't fight. Her eyes just searched the room, maybe hoping, just maybe, someone would stand. But no one did. Not Mrs. Biden, who once begged her to teach her grandson to read. Not Reverend Cook, whose boots she'd mended last winter, free of charge. Not even the mothers whose children had learned their ABCs at Charlotte's kitchen table while hers went hungry. Gracie clung to her mother's skirt until a deputy pulled her back. She dropped to her knees, sobbing. No one moved. The silence in that church felt like it could smother you. And then, the door opened again. No one turned right away, but the air that followed, heavier than rain, made heads turn. Donald Carter stepped inside, soaked through, broad-shouldered, hat low. The storm clung to him like it didn't want to be left outside. He didn't say a word, didn't even draw his gun, just walked forward, slow and steady, past the frozen stairs and the altar, and stopped beside Charlotte. His boots landed inches from the sheriff's polished shoes. "Donald," Rusk said cautiously, like the name left a bitter taste. "This ain't your business." Donald looked down at Charlotte, her cuffed hands, then at Gracie, crying on the floor. He knelt, offering one strong hand to the girl. She didn't hesitate. She curled up next to him like he was the last safe place on earth. Then he stood again, eyes locked on the sheriff's. "Take those cuffs off," Donald said, calm and flat. "This is the law," Rusk replied. "No," Donald said. "This is cowardice with a badge." A gasp whispered through the room. Someone shifted in a pew but sank right back down. The Reverend stepped forward, his voice brittle. "Brother Donald, this ain't—" "You chained a woman in a house of God," Donald cut in. "That makes it mine." Rusk's hand twitched near his belt, but he wasn't stupid. He knew what Donald Carter was, not just a man quick on the draw. Worse, he was right and willing to stand still until someone admitted it. "She stole from the school," Rusk tried. Donald didn't flinch. She was the school. Half them kids wouldn't know their letters if not for her. Gracie reached for her mother. Charlotte didn't speak, just stared at Donald like he was a ghost she'd prayed might come back. The sheriff exhaled. The cuffs clicked open, fell to the floor. Charlotte's wrists were red and bruised, but free. No one applauded. No one cheered. But now the silence was thick with something else. Shame. Donald helped her up. She didn't lean on him. Just nodded, barely. Not surrender, just a kind of grace. They walked back down the aisle, eyes forward. The doors swung wide. Rain poured outside like absolution. Charlotte paused, turned just slightly. Her voice clear and strong, cut to the back row. "Gossip's easy," she said, "but decency, that's a choice." And then she was gone. The rain hadn't let up by morning. It beat steady on the tin roofs and muddy streets of Greystone Hollow, as if trying to scrub the town clean of what it had done the night before. But shame doesn't wash off so easy. Donald Carter leaned against the rail of the boarding house porch, cigarette burning low in the corner of his mouth. He hadn't slept, just watched the storm. Sometimes justice doesn't need a gavel, just someone stubborn enough to stay standing. Behind him, the door creaked open. Miss Hattie, the boarding house owner, stepped out with 2 chipped mugs of coffee. No words, just handed him one and sat in the rocking chair beside him. The quiet between them was the kind you only find between people who've lived through a few things and stopped needing to explain them. "She gonna be all right?" Hattie finally asked. Donald took a sip, watching the water run like veins through the mud in the street. "She'll have a bruise or two. Nothing compared to what that town tried to do to her spirit. Rusk ain't gonna let that stand." "I know." Miss Hattie rocked slowly. "And you?" Donald didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted toward the church steeple, barely visible through the mist. "I'm tired," he said eventually, "but not done." Across town, in a borrowed dress and with Gracie beside her, Charlotte knocked on the schoolhouse door. It wasn't even unlocked yet. She wasn't there to teach, not today, just to look inside. The blackboard still held her last chalk marks, half-erased numbers and letters, mid-lesson. The smell of dust and wood and chalk hit her like a memory that never left. Gracie ran her fingers along a desk, small enough to fit her frame. Her eyes looked to her mother, unsure. Charlotte didn't cry, she just smiled softly. "This was ours," she said, "and it will be again." Behind them, a voice cleared its throat. Reverend Cook, hat in hand. He looked smaller in the daylight, like truth had stripped the title from him and left only a man. I owe you an apology, Miss Bennet." She turned, said nothing. "I should have spoken," he added. "In the church, I knew better." Charlotte's gaze didn't soften, but she nodded. "Then speak louder next time." He bowed his head. Gracie reached up, took her mother's hand. "Can we go now?" Charlotte glanced back one last time at the blackboard, then nodded. "Yes, baby, we can go." Later that day, the sheriff's office stood quiet, save for the rhythmic scribble of a pen. Lyle Rusk sat behind his desk, jaw tight, reviewing paperwork that somehow looked more damning than any wanted poster. A knock came. He didn't look up. "Come in." The door creaked. Boot steps. Donald Carter stood there, rain dripping from his hat onto the wooden floor. He didn't bother with a greeting. "You gonna fix this, or am I gonna have to?" The sheriff set his pen down, met Donald's eyes with the tired defiance of a man whose authority had cracked but not yet shattered. "You're not the law here." "No," Donald said, stepping forward, "but I know what it's supposed to look like." Rusk's jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but there was no fight left in the man. He opened a drawer, pulled out a paper. "The complaint was anonymous," he said, "but the handwriting matches Clayton Darnell." Donald's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went hard. "Clayton's father owns half this town," the sheriff added, almost defensively. "Then maybe it's time someone owned the other half," Donald replied. He turned to go. Rusk called after him. "You're playing with fire, Carter." Donald paused in the doorway, glanced back. "Good," he said. "Maybe it'll burn something that needs burning." Then he was gone. That night, Charlotte tucked Gracie into bed at Miss Hattie's, her hands still smelling faintly of chalk dust. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The world went quiet, like it was holding its breath. Gracie whispered, "Mama, is Mr. Carter gonna stay?" Charlotte brushed hair from her daughter's forehead, the corners of her mouth turning up just slightly. "I don't know," she said softly. "But some men don't ride away until the job is done." She kissed Gracie's cheek and stood by the window, watching the dark. And far off, just at the edge of the horizon, a lantern swung gently on a porch, still burning. Justice had come to Greystone Hollow, but it hadn't come with guns or speeches. It had come with someone who refused to look away.